Thanks for staying with us. We turn our attention now to the crises in a number of state legislatures. Well, the rumble has been heard mostly in Zamfara, Lagos, Rivers, and some other houses of assembly. But before we go into the discussion, let's get to see this report by Ignatius Nkwo.
Legislative assemblies in Nigeria are expected to be guardians of democracy, but unfortunately, some state assemblies have become battlefields for power, fame, and alliances. Lagos, Zamfara, and Rivers State houses of assembly are prominent cases. Trouble erupted at the Lagos State House of Assembly on the 13th of January 2025. In a dramatic fashion, Speaker Mudashiru Obasa was voted out by 36 out of 40 members while he was on vacation, accused of gross misconduct. In a swift and unexpected move, Deputy Speaker Mojisola Miranda was handed the gavel.
Strive to preserve the fundamental and objective and directive principles
of state policy
contained
in the Constitution of the Federal Republic
of Nigeria, and so help me God.
But the storm was far from over. Obasa refused to accept his removal, storming the assembly complex in a desperate attempt to reclaim his position.
Are you back now?
I've told you repeatedly, I've never been removed. There's nothing like impeachment.
The standoff sparked crisis and tension. Security operatives were forced to tighten surveillance, bracing for a full-blown confrontation between rival factions and their supporters. As the crisis escalated, Obasa took his battle to the Lagos State High Court, suing the state government and Miranda. For 49 days, the house was in turmoil, until, in a stunning twist, Obasa was reinstated as Speaker and Miranda returned as Deputy Speaker, describing her decision to step down as giving chance for peace rather than weakness. In faraway north, Zamfara State, a political storm rages for more than a year, fueled by internal disputes and allegations of executive interference. The crisis exploded in February 2024 when 8 members of the State Assembly were suspended over allegations of misconduct, conspiracy, mischief, and holding an illegal sitting. Speaker Biliaminu Moriki declared that the members had forced their way into the clerk and sergeant-at-arms offices to stage an unauthorized session. But the suspended members hit back, accusing the Speaker of acting on the orders of the executive branch to silence opposition. They claimed they were being punished for refusing to be rubber stamp for the executive. The crisis deepened when the Speaker struck again, declaring the seat of the minority leader, Aliyu Ango Kagara, vacant, citing absenteeism. Desperate for intervention, some members turned to the National Assembly, and still there was no lifeline. If Lagos was a political ambush and Zamfara a long siege, then Rivers is a clash of the titans. At the Rivers State House of Assembly, tension boiled over in October 2024 when members believed to be loyal to the former governor of the state, Nyesom Wike, led by Martin Amehule, launched impeachment proceedings against Governor Similaye Fubara. The battle split the 31-member assembly into warring factions, with the other faction led by Edison Ehie and later Victor Oko Jumbo, both sides refusing to back down. What followed was nothing short of anarchy. The impeachment attempt triggered violent confrontations, culminating in the burning of a section of the assembly complex. In a shocking move, the state government demolished the complex under the guise of reconstruction, thereby escalating the crisis. The court eventually intervened, reinstating the leadership of the Martin Amehule and 26 other members, ruling that they had not defected from the People's Democratic Party, PDP, to the All Progressives Congress, APC. Consequently, the court also ruled that federal allocations to Rivers State be immediately halted until the assembly was legally constituted. Now, the Amehule-led faction is demanding that Governor Fubara should present the 2025 budget. Well, the drafters of the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria envisaged such a situation, And that's why Section 11, subsection 4 of the Constitution provides that in the case of breakdown of law and order in the State Assembly, the National Assembly shall take over legislative functions of that assembly. Ignatius Nkwo.
All right, that sets the tone for our discussion tonight. Let me introduce our guests. I'd like to welcome to this program Honorable Francis Ejirogene Waive, the Chairman, House Committee on Rules and Business, House of Representatives Committee on Rules and Business. Thanks for being here with us.
My pleasure, thank you.
Right, and we're joined tonight by Jide Uju, development consultant, author, and public affairs analyst. Jide, it's been a while. Good to see you again.
My pleasure.
All right.
Good evening, Nigerians.
And I believe we're joined tonight by the Right Honorable Adibo Ogundoyin, the Speaker of the Oyo State House of Assembly, who is Chairman, Conference of Speakers of State Legislature. Honorable, thanks for being with us tonight.
Actually, my pleasure to be here tonight. And good evening, Nigerians. Happy to be here.
Right. This is via Zoom. Well, let's begin this conversation. There are some who say politics is essentially conflictual, but it doesn't explain why the House of Assembly, which are seen as, the bedrock of the democratic experience, which we are all in, are so unstable, and with the legislature being unstable, it's those who said this isn't what democracy should be about. It's the legislature is that critical part of the democratic experience, and it should be the least place that should be unstable. What do you say, Honorable?
Well, thank you very much. I'm personally not surprised that the Parliament is suffering what is going through in this experience, democratic experience, mainly because during the time of military intervention, the legislature suffered a lot, complete absence. So every time there is a reintroduction of civilian rule, it's like beginning afresh. So in these 25 years thereabout of this republic, it has been a learning again for the legislature. And our people have not come to terms with the fact that the legislature is the first arm of government, as it were, because the parliament makes the laws before the executive can implement, and then before the judiciary can interpret. So it's been a learning curve, and we are maturing. And with this process, there is also the problem of interference from the executive. We know that the dividing line between the three arms of government is very thin. When the executive issues executive orders, they seem to get into the realm of lawmaking. When the judiciary interprets some of the laws, and they seem to dive into lawmaking. In the same way, when the legislature carries out its oversight functions, we seem to also go into executive domain. So all of that is a problem, and we must also admit that the process of electing lawmakers in our country, particularly at the state level, is not as good as it is at the federal level. In fact, it's worse off at the local level, where they're just handpicked. At the state level, many times the governorship election influences who is able to emerge as a lawmaker at the state level. So when they get on board, the independence of the legislature there becomes very questionable. At the federal level, there is also some of that touch, but not as pronounced at the state level. So you find out at the federal level, there's more of independence of the legislature. In fact, the individual lawmaker at the federal level is most of the time on his own, with his free will, free mind to do what he thinks best to do. But at the state level, anytime there is a difference in opinion by individual lawmakers or by a group of lawmakers, there's always that conflict. And before you know it, there is executive interference. And when there is executive interference, there is this sponsorship of problems and division, impeachment of presiding officers, principal officers, and all of that. So that's what we're experiencing. For me, as we continue to mature in our democracy, particularly the parliament, we'll begin to see less of this happening in our democracy.
All right, Chidiojo, what do you make of all of this? It's like an unending, I mean, take River State, for instance. It's so many twists and turns.
But they are not issues that we don't know what is driving the instability, as I may want to call it. It's a very known fact, whether you're talking of Zamfara, Lagos, or Rivers. I've had the opportunity of weighing in my column in The Punch. Even last week, I did analyze what's happening in Lagos and Rivers. The dramatic personnel, that are responsible for this conflict are well known, and their names are in public domain. And as Honorable has rightly said, there's executive interference, and there's also issue of I won't even go the route of military hangover, because 26 years, a 26-year-old man or woman could have fathered a child. So if you are still trying to say we are a nascent democracy or because of military rule, military was there. They did their own bit for 29 years. But for the larger part, since 1960, it has been civil rule. But one thing I will add to what Honorable has rightly said is the unwillingness of the governors to let go in terms of financial and administrative autonomy for the State Assembly. Two times the Constitution has been altered to grant financial autonomy to State Assembly, and several state governments have not fully implemented that constitutional provision, granting financial autonomy to Assembly. So, in a situation where the funding of the Assembly is still routed through the governor, and it sees, it precise, it determines what goes to the Assembly and what doesn't go, who does he release money to, who does he not release money to. Look at the state, the Rivers situation. The Supreme Court had to make a consequential order that all the monies owed the Parliament, the 27 parliamentarians, should be released back to them. That was one part of the order of September and February 28. Why should a governor withhold money meant for the Assembly? Because there is a dispute which will eventually be resolved. And that's why you see the antagonism when the governor reached out and said, let's meet. In fact, he even included the issue of this payment of their withheld money as part of the agenda for the meeting. The question is, should that have happened in the first place? Recall that why Honorable could say what he's saying was that way back in 2010, the Constitution was altered to give financial autonomy to National Assembly. And that's what they are enjoying today. So the moment the national budget is signed into law, what is due to the National Assembly is given to it. It's not administered by the president or by the CBN governor or by the accountant general. The National Assembly is self-accounting, is autonomous. So if the president signs a budget of 300 billion for National Assembly, it's part of the service-wide vote. They get it immediately after the president signs. But it is not so yet with the State Assembly. Some have complied, some have not, majority have not complied, citing one thing or the other. Oh, there is no State Assembly Service Commission. Oh, there is no, there are about 2 or 3 things they continue to lash on why they have not fully complied with that. It's a constitutional order. 2 times, the First Amendment, they found, the Governors Forum they found an issue with it. Then there was another alteration in 2020, the last one, 2023, the one the President Buhari signed. So why have they not complied fully? That is part of the problem.
Okay, let's go over to the Right Honorable Adiba Ogundoyin, the Chairman Conference of Speakers of State Legislature. Well, Honorable, are you worried about this unending troubles in state assemblies?
Speakers, and it's something that the Conference of Speakers find challenging at this particular moment, talking about the autonomy, although right now it's a constitutional matter and it has been assented into law. So we've been pushing on all fronts to ensure that there's financial autonomy granted to all state houses of assembly. And as you rightly said, it's part of the issues that has drawn the state houses of assembly back. But we know that the governors are cooperating with us from the Conference of Speakers. We've engaged with them on several occasions, and we believe that moving forward, there are some state houses of assembly already that are practicing full autonomy. We have Plateau State practicing full autonomy. We have Lagos State also. And we should also remember there's also a function of available funds, as so to speak, as we've engaged with the Governors Forum. But we believe that over time, with maturity and with advocacy, we will be able to ensure that full financial autonomy will be granted. Moreover, there's also cases in different state houses of assembly where we have partial autonomy. Partial autonomy in the sense whereby recurrent fees or personnel budget head would be released to the state houses of assembly, whereby capital funds of capital heads would be held back. So these are some of the issues that we are still working on. And as Mr. Tunja has said, we are 26 years of democracy uninterrupted, and you'll find out that the importance of the legislature and the powers that the legislatures have is also something that might be worrisome to the governors, in terms of releasing them totally. But something that we should all consider is the cooperation between the legislative and the executive, as well as the judiciary, that makes the 3 arms of government working together in synergy will definitely bring development to the states in question, and even at the national level as well, as we've seen. So it's something that we're concerned about, but also it's something that we've been working on, not just from now, from times past. My time as the Chairman Conference of Speakers, we've engaged severally with the leadership of the Nigerian Governors Forum, and as at 3 weeks ago, we had another engagement with them, and we hope that with those engagements, we're going to see some difference and impact and development when it comes to the financial autonomy. And we also are also asking, the way the whole nation stood up for the local government autonomy, and we always talk about it every time. We don't talk about the advocacy for the state houses of assembly as much. And that is a good reason why this kind of platform is also important for us to put out the views, and you can hear it from the horse's mouth exactly what's going on with the state legislatures.
Beyond the financial autonomy of the states, of course, you know that a number of them are facing one crisis or the other. And sometimes these go just beyond the matter of the financial autonomy. You have seen a number of states. We mentioned Lagos, Zamfara, and Plateau is a peculiar case, for instance, where you find that members of the assembly, some move to remove presiding officers, a group of people continue with the, with the business of the house, and this is all over the place. You saw the case with Zamfara. Now, what do you think is responsible for this scenario in these states?
From my view and from what I know, because I make it one of my own points to ensure that I check up on the welfare of all the speakers and even members likewise. In all the federation, we have 991 state constituencies, and you would see how wide the scope is. But in the state houses of assembly, in as much as we have the executive interference, we also have political interference, external political interference in a lot of the state houses of assembly. And this has also caused a lot of issues in terms of when people come, to destabilize the government through the state houses of assembly. It is not a new thing. We can see in the case of Zamfara, according to the investigation we've done, we've seen external influences in Zamfara, and the Conference of Speakers, we kick against external influence, but also we also appeal to members of the state houses of assembly to always put the interest of the people first, and shun personal interest or shun political interest. Once we have contested and we've been elected into office by our constituents, it's important for us to focus on ways that we can develop our constituencies and also bring dividend of democracy to our constituents. So in the end, in as much as there will definitely be external influence, we have to ensure that we understand the reason why we are elected and follow through with the reason why. And that is what we try to advocate for to our people.
We'll return to you in a moment, but Honorable Wahive,
Yeah.
they talk about the role of godfathers or a master puppeteer who's behind the scenes and moving the puppets. So how do you get out of, break the shackles of all that?
Yeah, I think about the history of crisis in state assemblies. In this 9th assembly now, we're discussing Lagos, Rivers, Zamfara. In the last assembly, I know we had issues with Bauchi State, and then Edo. We even had to send delegations from the National Assembly to these assemblies to find a way to intervene, to bring peace, trying to invoke 11-4, But the external influences is actually an issue. And I think it begins from the selection process. The Nigerian people, the voting public, must look at the quality of candidates that show up for election into state houses of assembly. We must look at people who are well educated, people who are a bit independent, people who are matured, and people who are not identified to be at the beck and call of some godfathers, people who have national interest at heart. So the selection process is a challenge. And then another issue is that power of proclamation given to the executive. In fact, presently before the House of Representatives Constitution Review Committee, some bills trying to change that aspect that requires the executive to proclaim or issue a proclamation for the inauguration of the House. That's where the problem started in Edo in the 9th Assembly. And we hope that if that is passed into law, the product process will be so changed that will not be too dependent on the executive, who will proclaim at different times, or we are of the night, or at locations that only some individuals would know and recognize. That's a challenge. The other challenge is the high turnover we find in the legislature. We have a situation where most houses of assemblies, and in fact this affects the National Assembly too, where you have up to 80% new members showing up, such that what you have spent on training and the experience gathered over the years will be lost. So when you have a new set of people, they don't even know their rights and privileges and know how to insist on that. You find this example when you do constitutional review and you send the amendment for state assemblies autonomy. You find some state assemblies voting against that.
Right. Yeah,
it's usually a shock
we saw that.
when you see that happen. You know, you're given your autonomy and you're turning it down. It shows the power of the, but like my brother Jide has said, it's the power of the purse and the idea that these external forces have control over the resources. So if, like is happening at the national level, the state assemblies can enjoy a first-line charge on their resources such that they don't depend on the executive to function and do their job. We'll find that moving forward, they'll be more independent and then they'll be able to do what they are elected to do. So we also have that recommendation again in this 10th Assembly's Constitutional Review. We hope that when it gets to that stage, the state houses of assembly will, 36 of them will pass it for those aspects that have not yet been ascended into law. And those that have been ascended into law, we expect that the executives at the state level will obey the law of the land, just like it's been obeyed at the federal level, such that our democracy will be able to mature and we'll have some peace in the state assemblies.
Well, Jide, there's this other angle to it. Sometimes judicial decisions, pronouncements, lead to this kind of a situation. I want to take the case of Plateau, for instance. A judicial decision meant that there was bound to be some problems in the Plateau Assembly. And it's playing out now, isn't it?
Yeah, unfortunately, I followed that after the 2023 election. It was the judiciary that saved Governor Caleb Mutfwang, but for the fact that the constitution had been altered to allow the governorship election to terminate at the Supreme Court, it could have been swept along with that judicial interpretation that led to about 16 members of the Plateau State House of Assembly Alliance were affected by issue of whether there was PDP structure in Plateau or they don't have structure, and the judicial interpretation by the Election Petition Tribunal and the Court of Appeal. But by the time this case, which unfortunately for those House of Reps and Senate and State Assembly,
the stage has been set for confusion already.
There are cases terminated at the Court of Appeal, which upheld the decision of the tribunal. However, the luck the governor had is that he was able to appeal to Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court decision now shows that the lower court erred in law.
Right.
But it becomes a futile exercise because you cannot now say, go for the trial.
So all this means that a stage had been set already.
Exactly, but it cannot be a precedent. The good thing is that with the Supreme Court decision, it can no longer be a precedent in 2027 to say, okay, issue about primaries and nominations.
But the now is causing a lot of confusion, and that has been the precursor to the chaos that you witness.
I quite agree, but you see, the whole, and that's why people have lost, larger majority of people, particularly in election-related cases, people have doubts about the integrity of the judiciary, particularly at the lower level. And that goes without saying, because when you look at Court of Coordinate Jurisdiction giving conflicting decision, it's very disheartening. Look at what happened in Osun. Court of Appeal decision subjected to different interpretation. I don't don't think their lordship should make or couch their decision in such a way that is ambivalent or ambiguous. There should be very clear, okay, the tenure of these people have not ended or it has ended. But this party is saying, oh, the Court of Appeal did not restate. This one is saying the Court of Appeal restated. And so the judiciary is part of the problem. But it's not, you see, we have myriads of problems, plethora of them. Let's go back to Lagos. Lagos issue is godfatherism and external influence. Look at the influence of Governance Advisory Council, which is not a recognized body. It's not constitutionally recognized. It's not in the statute books. The APC in Lagos were watching when this whole idea of removing speaker was mooted and perfected by the Governance Advisory Council without the buy-in of the leader, which is the president, which is why there was this altercation about, oh, wrongful removal, oh, yeah, go and reinstate him, mediate, and all of that. So, like my brother, Speaker of Oyo State House of Assembly and Chairman of the Conference of Speakers said, it goes beyond financial autonomy, which is also what your observation is. It goes beyond financial autonomy, but we also have the influence of powerful political interest outside of the assembly. And it also comes to issue of financing, campaign financing. Who financed your election? Who brought you into the assembly? Who bankrolled you? Because whether we like it or not, if somebody, there are insinuations that a particular individual bought form and bankrolled the election of a particular state assembly, all of them did not spend their money to contest. Who do you think they will be loyal to? The loyalty will be to the founder, to the godfather. So we have this godfatherism, we have issue of outside political interest groups, like the Governance Advisory Council that I've mentioned in Lagos. They are not recognized by the NTA, they are just an advisory body, but we know that they are very powerful. You disobey them at your own peril. We know what happened to former Governor Akinwumi Ambode when he crossed their path. They ensured that he didn't get a re-election ticket. So groups like that, and there could be several others across the state, because it's not all the crises across states that comes into national prominence. But the most important thing is that we still have some way to go. And what we need to understand is democracy is not a sprint, it's a marathon. Look at America. Will you have believed what happened with American election last year, last November? Look at the assassination, 2 times assassination attempt on Donald Trump. One almost knocked life out of it. And that's an America for you. And look at what the after effect has been in terms of even the dichotomy in the House, the Republicans and the Democrats. So there is no perfect democracy anywhere. It's a learning curve, but I believe judiciary is culpable, particularly in the case of Plateau that you have said. But it's not only in Plateau again. It's not only in Plateau. Because when you also look at some of their decisions, look at Kano. But for Supreme Court, Kano was going to boil after the election in 2023 because of judicial decision at the lower court. You recall that the election of the governor of Kano was invalidated by the Court of Appeal and only was reinstated by the Supreme Court. So Supreme Court gave a lifeline to the governor of Kano, to the governor of Plateau, but the lower rung, who did not have the pleasure or the opportunity to ventilate their grievance or seek redress at the apex court, they are licking their wounds. So campaign finance is part of it. Who is funding your election? Who brought you to the assembly? Whose bid have you come to do? what is the standard operating procedure also? And the Honorable mentioned something very, very important, which is the high turnover. High turnover, you know, every time I have been involved in capacity building for State Assembly and even National Assembly. And you train these people, you tell them international best practices, they understand the procedure, they are able to do stuff, but when they contest election, they never get to come back.
But the high turnover, isn't it more of the syndrome of turn by turn?
Well, it is partly, not essentially. Somebody like Speaker of Lagos, Obasa, has been in the assembly since 2003. He has won 6 re-elections, 6 back to back. So,
but there are some assemblies where you have members and they say, look, you have done your turn. You have to give way.
That's why I said it's partially
part of it. And there's also the godfather part.
Yeah.
The godfather now decides if you go second, third, you become too powerful. We better clip your wings and get a new rookie that will not measure heights with us. You know, it's part of the problem, but we are going to mature out of all of this. Okay. That's my belief. And you recall that even before now, Rivers under Governor Amechi also had these kind of problems that even extended to the courts in Rivers State. So as we go along, there will be people learning from all of this. Democracy will be maturing, and the Nigerian people are watching. I think when the next elections come in, all this will influence the choice of people to be elected into parliament. And that will change the narrative, I believe.
Okay, let me just put this to Honorable Adibo Ogunduri, who is chair of the Conference of Speakers of Legislatures. I'm thinking here, how much influence exert in cases like this, in resolution? Because it would seem that in some of these states that we have mentioned, nothing by way of a solution is coming from the Conference of Speakers.
You know, the Conference of Speakers is a body that sees to the welfare of speakers and members. As we know, it's not necessarily constitutional, but it's a powerful body that will come together to deliberate on issues. For example, constitutional amendment. I'm happy that we discussed about how previous assemblies rejected or did not assent to the constitutional amendments, but we are very happy and we're very proud that in our time we're able to get that over the line. And it's also a body that we use to harmonize positions, like the standing orders of the state houses of assembly to have a uniform, to also agitate for things we would like to see in the constitutional amendment. So, all in all, what we've discussed today, I'm very surprised because of the insights that we've discussed. It's one of the issues that is drawing the state houses of assembly back, especially the issue of the high turnover of members. You will see in other developed countries where they have very strong legislature. We have senators, we have congressmen in the United States of America that have been there for 30 years, 40 years, some even 50 years, whereby in our own climate we have, short-lived representative from the various states' constituencies, and this is a drawback. What we also see is there are different state houses, state constituencies with its own peculiarities. There are some constituencies that you'll be surprised that they already have an understanding that they alternate between the towns within the constituencies, one term after the other. If not, they could even be dire consequences. And we have in some other places whereby it's allowed for the same honorable member to keep on representing, and you find out that the experience that is there embedded within the honorable member that has a longer term in the state houses of assembly or in the federal houses of assembly, tend to give back more in terms of quality representation back to his constituents. So all in all, these are some of the drawbacks that we see. But moving forward, we, as the Conference of Speakers, have really stood against external interference in the activities of the state houses of assembly. But, you know, in as much as we know that moving forward, as our democracy mature, as the legislative arm of governments mature, we will see a different path, you know, and you already see, especially with the young legislators coming on board, we have a different way of thinking, whether in the federal house or even in the state houses of assembly. You see more and more youth being interested in politics. Another thing we advocate for is also women participation in politics. I was listening to and I watched the program right before this program started, and I saw the interest, you know, and the different views of women participation in politics. And how you ended it, it's a real indication of what the problem really is and the drawback in terms of the capital intensive, you know, of the politics that we practice in Nigeria, you know, and also the amount of women that will show interest in politics, because I can assure you that for every 10 man that shows interest in politics, you find out that we have about 1 or 2 women that will show the same interest in the same position. So what we advocate for is more advocacy on women inclusion in politics through just being aware, through them being informed about what they could do and how important it is. And I'm happy that in our own political climate that this is the conversations that are going on. Notwithstanding, in the state houses of assembly also, we have to find ways to harmonize positions, and the godfatherism factor is not something that we see that will disappear immediately, but I can assure you that from what I've seen in my little time in politics, I started politics in 2017, and I got into office in 2018, and from 2018 to now that we're in 2025, I can assure you that we have more youth involvement in politics. The way of thinking within politics has changed. Just like Honorable has said, you know, the future seems bright, and we're looking forward even to more advocacy in the freedom of the legislative, you know, in order for dividend of democracy to touch the grassroots. Because without that, you know, it's going to be very difficult, you know, for us to perform our functions, such as oversight functions, without the overbearing, you know, influence of the executive, which of course will be there. But we also have to look at, you know, the relationship between the legislative and the executive, not one that must be in constant conflict, but it must be one that must work together for development for the state or as for the federal government, as the case might be. So we are of the opinion that as long as you have, you know, good leadership in the executive and you have responsible leadership in the legislative, they should be able to work out modalities for, as we discussed earlier, the issue of financial autonomy. You know, as long as there's a good understanding and there's a responsible head of the legislative, because you also have to understand that, you know, we have to be careful, you know, as we move forward. I'm not saying that, you know, one legislative house is irresponsible or, or whatnot, but, you know, to whom much is given, much is expected. And the reason for asking for legislative autonomy or financial autonomy for the legislature must be one that will have a positive impact on the people and not, you know, to enrich pockets of the legislatures, which is also a concern that we'll also have to look into.
To the matter that as the fight goes on, the losers are basically the people and the state who, you know, are left to just watch while those they elected who should be working for their advancement are busy throwing punches.
Sadly, you can see what's happening in Rivers State at the moment. Nobody's talking about governance. Nobody's talking about delivering the dividends of democracy to the people. What is going on now is a fight of supremacy. How each arm of government, I mean, the executive and the legislature, how they can hold on to their positions That's all that is going on. Especially now that the Supreme Court has barred the CBN from releasing funds to the Rivers State government. So everything is coming to a standstill. But the executive will be able to function with the IGR, the internally generated revenue, but that will be at the expense of the people. Projects will not be able to be paid for and executed. Salaries and other payments will be hampered. And then at the end of the day, it's the people that will suffer. Even after the whole thing has been settled, we are still going to get into the situation where the value of the money that accrue to the state when it's eventually paid, whether it will still amount to the same as at the date when it was due, and not to talk about the cost of replacing infrastructure that has been destroyed during the process. Edo State in the last assembly is still bleeding from the situation. So it's a clarion call for all those involved. This is not a time to chest out and try to feed your ego. This is a time to look out for the people, because these are the people you promised to serve when you campaigned and when you took the oath of office, even as a member of the House of Assembly or as the governor of the state. You promised to serve the people, do everything for the well-being of the Nigerian people. We must look at that again and come to the negotiating table and make sure that there is peace restored to Rivers State and every state that is involved in that. I'm glad that Lagos now have a semblance of stability. We hope that it will endure to the end of this tenure up to 2027. And we hope that the lessons learned from this would help when we go into the next assembly in 2027, so that all these kind of things will not be a thing of the past. The legislature and the executive should be able to respect one another and know where the dividing line is. It's the doctrine of separation of powers. And we'll be able to do everything for the well-being of the Nigerian people. I think if we do this, we'll be able to experience progress, peace and development for our people.
Right. Some have said a political solution to most of these issues is what's desirable, and that the more the gladiators seek judicial interpretation and judicial intervention, the more this will go on, because there's a lot that needs to be put in order. But again, if you talk about a political situation, it goes back to those who hold the aces in the arena. So what way out?
Well, the way out, first we must understand that it's not all the assemblies that are in crisis. Majority of them are peaceful. They are doing their bit, and the people expect them to do a lot more. The few, and we have only been able to cite 3 out of 36. So 3 out of 36 is still negligible that we could say truly and genuinely are in crisis. And the ideal is to seek alternative dispute resolution mechanism. Is always cheaper and faster. Litigation leaves the two parties embittered, exhausted, and drained financially. Because if you look at the cost of litigation, you hire senior advocates, it doesn't come cheap. Look, the Lagos issue that my guy is referencing to, it's not been laid to rest. They are still in court. They are still in court.
Perhaps a temporary calm before the larger storm.
They are still in court because last Thursday or Friday they went to court. One is saying it's now an academic exercise. The other said no, it's not yet. In fact, I was reading something about one car purchase or procurement, 5 billion, 7 billion, and all of that. So you never can tell. But you see, I said something earlier on. It's a learning curve. You can't do without godfathers.
For now.
Eternally, you never will not be able to deal without godfathers, because arising from cost of elections, if G.D. Ojo wants to go into politics, does he have the wherewithal? I don't know about you, but you know the capital-intensive nature of our politics. What you need to spend to win, or to even get the ticket of a party that can deliver victory to you, because it's not all parties that can deliver victories to you. So many have to run to, godfather for support, to bankroll, or to, as a former Senate president said, some of them sold their property to contest election. So if you sell your property, you are going to recoup it. And that brings issue of, corruption into the whole space. We've not talked of the role of corruption.
Well,
many instances where you have conflict, where you have even the stability at the principal officers level, is allegation of corrupt practices, gross misconduct, greed and mafia. Look at Lagos. The whole thing that Obasa is fighting back over was the fact that he was supposedly impeached on basis of corruption, gross misconduct, insubordination, arrogance, and all of that. Now, nobody wants to go in a political career with that kind of tainted image. And that's why he is saying, even if you want to remove me, follow due process. Let me wash myself clean so that I can have a future.
Well,
so the politics, the cost of elections has made issue of godfathers a necessary evil.
Again, the matter of godfatherism is also borders on corruption, because most of the so-called godfathers, they do this as an investment.
It's a political investment. So it has its own implications.
Well, as we round off, Right Honorable Adiba Ogundoyi, let me just quickly sound you out on this as we round off. It's to do with the first part of the first topic we discussed on this program, which is the matter of reservation of seats for women. As chair of the Conference of Speakers, I would like to know how legislators are responding to this matter, because the women felt a little bit bad about losing out the last time, and many women will be counting on the legislature this time around to let that bill pass. What are your thoughts on that?
Very direct. With the Conference of Speakers, we will support this bill. Unfortunately, in the last exercise, constitutional amendment exercise, it did not scale through from the National Assembly, so there was nothing we could do from the State House of Assembly position. But we are hoping that this time around it will scale through the National Assembly and will be transmitted to the State Houses of Assembly, whereby we've spoken amongst ourselves, because we're considering various things, and we are very positive that we will have the numbers, 2/3 numbers, in order for this bill to scale. And that is just our position, simply put. So we are counting on the National Assembly to ensure that they do their own part, and the National Assembly to ensure that it scales through. And then from our own part in the State Houses of Assembly, we will gather ourselves together and ensure that this bill passes.
Right. Okay.
There's a challenge there. In the Ninth Assembly, which I was also privileged to be a part, I can't remember any time anybody lobbied me or any of my colleagues one-on-one on those bills. I did vote for them, having read through and all that. And I noticed, even in this 10th Assembly, there's no concerted effort. Lobbying is a part of politics. 2 years down the line, or nearly, no organization has targeted the 360 members individually to reach them. What we see is just on television.
There
must be some intellectual discussion. Yeah, there must be some intellectual discussion, some attempt to convince the members that this is the way to go, this is why, and this is what it takes. Many members today look at it, you reserve seats for women, why? How are you going to implement it? Many members don't understand it.
Okay.
So the women organizations need to do more. Civil society organizations need to do more. You know how to reach the 360 members in the House, the 109 senators. That effort must be geared up to reach them one-on-one with the details of what you are talking about and not just what they hear on television. So that by the time this thing comes for voting, it will scale through the National Assembly first before it can now go to the state houses, unlike what happened in the Ninth Assembly.
Okay. Well, it is on this note we'll have to leave this conversation. Let me start by thanking the Right Honorable Adebo Ogundoyin, the Chairman Conference of Speakers of State Legislatures and Speaker of the Oyo State House of Assembly. Right Honorable Ogundoyin, thank you very much for being part of this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
And then Jide Ojo, Development Consultant, friend on these conversations we haven't seen for a while. It's nice to have you back.
It's good to see you again, the ageless serious Toba.
Thank you very much.
Legendary, really.
Legendary, exactly, legendary. Our own Larry King.
And Right Honorable, and then of course Honorable Francis Ejirogene Owaive, Chairman, House of Representatives Committee on Rules and Business. Thank you for being part of this discussion.
It is my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's our program today. We thank you for watching. Next week we'll be back with NTA Tuesday Live. I'm Cyril Stover. Bye for now.